Hello, everybody. Milton Davis here from MV Media. We've got a special group of authors together today so we can talk about Sword and Soul and African fantasy. We're going to let the authors introduce themselves, and then we'll go through a round of questions. And I hope you enjoy it. So we're going to start to my left with Sarah Macklin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Macklin. I'm the author of The Royal Heretic. I have been writing some form of Sword and Soul since I was a teenager, and it's one of my favorite genres to play in.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah. We'll go next to Balogun Ojetade.
All right, greetings. I'm Balogun Ojetade. That's the first time Milton said my name right. All these years I've known him. Wow, man.
Took me 10 years of practice.
I know, man. That's something. I am Balogun, father, husband, father of 8, husband, grandfather of 5. I'm an author of 40 books, fiction and nonfiction, and of 6 role-playing games. When I say tabletop role-playing games, not the digital role-playing games. What else? That's about it for me. Sword and Soul wise, the second novel I ever wrote was Sword and Soul. It was Once Upon a Time in Africa, which Milton published. So that's me in a nutshell.
All right. Enoch?
Hi, all. Greetings from Zambia. Yeah, my name is Enoch Simbaya. It's good to be here. I'm the author of Nasomi's Quest, which is my first Sword and Soul African fantasy novel. Yeah, but I've been trying to write stories here and there, and I'm so glad that I can be part of this team and part of the people who are writing books and making content, I can say, in this journal. Yeah, so good to be here.
Okay. Peter?
All right, guys. First of all, I want to thank Milton for including me in this wonderful and beautiful gathering with wonderful and talented people. I'm glad to be here. Okay, I like to, in introduction, I like to introduce myself as a third person. Okay. Peter is a creative illustrator who is passionate about storytelling. That led him to establish Peter Entertainment. His work has been mentioned by numerous local and international press, and his title has won several awards. He is dedicated to only bringing original content to the mainstream. Yeah, and also I'm the creator of Newborn, Chioma, and several other African fantasy stories. I didn't even know what Sword and Soul was until I met Milton. He introduced me to the Sword and Soul. So that's like, oh, so this is what I've been creating since. Okay, fine, I like it. Good. Let's go from there. So that's it. That's who Peter is. Thank you very much.
All right. Antoine?
And then piggybacking off of Peter, same. Like I didn't know that there was a Sword and Soul genre until I met Milton and saw all the stuff and spaces that he was occupying. But my name is Antoine. I am a indie publisher, entrepreneur. I publish my own work as well as others, like children's books and a few other novellas. And I also am the owner of an audiobook company that just went full-time, in July. And my contribution to African Sword and Soul, I would say most aligning would be my debut novel called The Kishi, which is a mythology from Angola, from the Kimbundu people. And then I do contemporary now, so contemporary young adult fantasy, which is more in line with people who are familiar with Percy Jackson, except instead of Greek and Roman gods, it's the Orishas from West Africa and the African diaspora. So that's not really sword and soul as far as I know the definition of it. But my first one definitely is more in line. But yeah, that's me, Antoine.
But you're going to be sword and soul today, so.
You have no choice.
Yeah.
You're now.
So what I'd like to do is ask everybody some general questions about sword and soul, African fantasy. And then after we have some general questions, we're going to get some questions specific to each particular author. I've had the privilege and the opportunity to read books and stories by each of the people here and have enjoyed them. And it's one of the main reasons that I wanted to get everybody together to talk about this, because I think we are, this is a group of authors that covers all the different aspects and cover a wide range of, of opinions and views and knowledge. So let's get started. My first question would be, why did you choose to write sword and soul African-based fantasy, and even broader, use African culture as a backdrop for what you create? And we'll start with Antoine.
So for me, it was after watching, I think, season 6 of Game of Thrones, and I literally just Googled Game of Thrones, but in Africa. And I saw that Marlon James was at that time saying, I'm going to do that. And I think that turned out to be the, was it called Red Wolf, Black Leopard, or Black Leopard, Red Wolf? One of those combinations. It's something like that. But it wasn't exactly the kind of book that I would typically read or, jive with. So as most writers, it seems to be their origin point is, I could not find the book I wanted to read. So I wrote it myself. So that's what I did. I spent a year studying African history, on the world stage, the entire thing. And then I got, more and more close to individual people groups and tribes. And then that's when I landed on the Kishi, and I was really intrigued by it. And then with Googling the Kishi just on its own, there's absolutely no stories about them at all, except for maybe a little footnote in role-playing guides as remind me saying it, Balogun?
Balogun,
Balogun. And that's is that Yoruba?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, that's awesome. And that's even that, me being able to write this stuff, I'm now aware of that sort of thing, because before I wasn't, in doing all of my research. But that's what led me to do the Kishi. And I think it fits so well with Sword and Soul, because a lot of that story is about the act of sword play. I kind of adapted the capoeira, the sway method, to tie into the soul of this gentleman's mystical power, where he could see slightly into the future. He's a precog. So it actually really fits really well with that ebb and flow of the sword and the soul sort of thing going on.
But it's funny that you mentioned that, because that's what brought me to your book. When I saw the title and the name, the Kishi, I was familiar with that too. And I was like, oh man, somebody wrote a book about a Kishi, so I got to read this one, so, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, that was, specifically exactly what I was looking at. So Peter, what brought you to Sword and Soul African fantasy?
Yeah, like I said, I didn't know I was doing Sword and Soul, but I grew to love it. It's a unique brand name. Yeah, basically, why I decided to create a fantasy story. A lot of reasons, and it's all had to do with my development as a person and as an adult. And of course, it started from the Black and African identity, right? Why you African, your history, your past, your, how you see yourself. And I realized that there was nobody talking about, at the time, it was way back years ago, nobody was talking about, the history, the African backgrounds, the cultures, the histories in certain mediums, which I love, which was into comics, animation, video games, and all of that. So, and of course, I could draw, so being exposed to loads of comics, cartoons, and all that. But I realized that if I was going to create an African story, I had to start from my past so that I can understand how to go to the future. So years came, started doing my research, trying to understand cultures, because the truth is, in Africa, they don't teach you this thing, even in school. And that's what many people don't understand. They think, like the way in the US here, you can understand the American history, like the basic history is taught in grade school, but it's not. In Nigeria, where I'm from, they teach you basically European history. and which I think right now I believe is bad, and I feel it's an agenda. Has always been an agenda. So going way back, started doing my research, and lo and behold, I was then I now, for the first time, I now witnessed glorious stories, empires, cultures coming from everywhere. So I was like, wow, But originally, I want to tell a story about my own people because I'm from the Igbo-speaking part of Nigeria. So I'm an Igbo man. But after being exposed to different cultures, from north, east, west, south, Ashanti, everything, I was like, man, I got to do something. But then, because I had already seen Lord of the Rings, so that kind of inspired me. The different races coming together to fight this guy, this Sauron. That gave me the concept plus. So that kind of brought me all together to, because of the rich cultures that haven't been mentioned, the powerful legends and all that. So, and I love epic tales. I love epic stories. So that kind of built that world, and I now decided to dive all in. And as I went in, I was saying things. I said, okay, we gotta do this. So, build up the team, and now build the Chronicle of the Newborn, the rise of the Mlazi. Mlazi in Swahili means guardians. And through that concept, it gave birth to these characters. And these characters are created for just one purpose alone, to showcase these cultures in this fantasy story. So, we now have to think of ways to make it very good and interesting for everyone to read. But the main thing is to showcase the culture. Yeah, and showcase the culture now, because the world has changed. But we have to show the culture of the past. So, and that comes into the sword and soul that Mr. Milton finally let me know this is what I was doing. so that's what brought me, so it's a long story, but I'm trying to cut it short, So that's basically the summary, plus the history of Africa, the slavery, colonization, everything brought into the creation of this brand.
During my research, Akata Witch was one of my favorite books that I read by Nnedi Okorafor, who also did a lot of Igbo based mythology, like Juju and stuff like that, which I liked a lot.
Did you, because I grew up also reading Chinwe Achebe's book, The Things Fall Apart.
Yeah.
That's one of the most powerful African, you can call it Sword and Soul, because there was a bit of action, but it was deep rooted African culture from the Igbo speaking people. That's the Igbo people, the descendants of the Eri, the Eri tribe. So it's one of the most powerful, and I think the book is so popular worldwide. And so those things inspired me, because he's late now, the writer, but what he did was actually showcase the original Africa, the way it is, way back, the culture, the customs, the beautiful aesthetics and all that. So
Things Fall Apart is a great book.
It's a great book.
It's a book that basically explains and describes the colonial experience in one book, and it takes you through the whole process. And I think that's why it's an important book for people to read, because it basically is a fictional dramatization of what colonialism was and how it affected, West Africa.
Yeah, but for me personally, but deep inside, I wanted to showcase African cultures, because it's been marginalized, in this medium that I love, and it was wrong. I felt it was wrong, because how do Black people, African kids now relate with their true nature, things like that. So I said, okay, I'm going to do something about it. That's basically. So
Balogun, what was your why do you choose this? I know your answer, but I
Well, all my life, since I was 4 years old, that's pretty much all my life, I've been studying indigenous African martial arts. My father lived in Africa for 11 years, and he was in the military, but he trained. That was really his reason for wanting to go to Africa. He trained in Senegal and then in Mali. Okay, so all my life, I've been doing indigenous African martial arts, and I've been seeing the glory that's given to the Asian arts. That's purely marketing, right? Because on the continent, in most places, particularly West Africa, which I'm mostly familiar with, West and Central Africa, being a martial artist, a fighter of any type, is not it's kind of looked down on. Like, why are you doing that? You could be doing, so most of the time it's not public. You do have wrestlers, the sport wrestlers, right? So I wanted to show what we had. Originally, growing up, doing that, I would fight every culture's martial artist. And I had a big old head because I was beating the mess out of everybody. But that was because of just my level of training. I've grown to learn it's not the art so much, it's what you're doing with the art and the methodologies of your training that make you better, because you can learn anything, and if the way you learned it was crap, you're going to be doing crap. Okay, so that was the first way, and I was like, well, I can't keep doing this. I'm fighting people doggone it every day, and maybe 10 more people know about indigenous African martial arts. So that's just, you're putting my body on the line for nothing. This was way before MMA. So I said, well, I can write, and I was into the old movies with Harryhausen, stop animation, like Clash of the Titans, the Golden Voyage of Sinbad. I like that. So I said, okay, I got into film, majored in film. I said, okay, maybe I can do, but period pieces are expensive. So what can I do? Also into anime. Said, well, I can't draw, and animation's expensive. So, but I write. So I started writing. I decided to, I'm going to do a novel. My first novel was steampunk. It was the Chronicles of Harriet Tubman. But after that, I said the next novel I do is going to be something based in Africa, fantasy based in Africa. I read Indaba My Children by Musa Wazulu Credo Mutwa. 600 pages, one of the greatest books. Now that's folklore. It's not fiction, but he wrote it like fiction. It was incredible. 600 pages. I read it in about 3 days and have read it twice since. It's just amazing. The stories in there. And actually one of those stories in there, I'm going to, about Lumukanda. It's called I Lumukanda. I'm going to actually write a novel about that character. So I decided to kick around some of my ideas with friends. It was like an anime, but set in Africa, but I was going to write it as a novel. And I'm giving my ideas to my friends, and they're loving it. My students, they're loving it. My martial arts students, and I was teaching creative writing at a private school. They were loving it. So I said, okay, I'm gonna sit down and do it. Started writing it. I get it done. I thought I was finished. Met with Milton, talked with Milton. I said, I have this book, we're talking about it. He said, well, let me check it out. I give it to him. He said, I'd like to publish it. I said, okay, cool. He said, yeah, but you got to add probably about 50,000 words. I think I had 10,000 words, thought I was finished with a novel. So I said, oh my God, 50,000 words. So I went back in the lab and really sat down and started putting my heart and soul into that book. And we got Once Upon a Time in Africa out of that. And then after that, Beneath the Shining Jewel, which is a horror novel, horror sword and soul novel that I'm working on book 2 right now. I'll be finished with that probably in about a couple of months. And then once I get the artwork, I'm bringing that out. And then Milton and I just started talking about a game. We need to bring a game out like this. Dungeons and Dragons is out there. So many of our people are into Dungeons and Dragons. But even when I played, I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons. I'm 53. I've been playing since I was 11. So, and throughout all of that, the only time up until recently that there was an African setting was one that I wrote. I did read it was funny.
Wait, are you behind Tombs of Annihilation?
No, that's later on.
Okay.
I read Dragon Magazine, I believe number 22, and I read this man named Charles Saunders, who wrote about the creatures of Africa, and then it was later somebody translated those monsters into Dungeons and Dragons stats. And I read that and said, wow, finally, this white man got it right. I didn't know Charles was black until later, you know. I got to tell him that story, and he laughed. But, you know, mainly it was me just writing the settings. And I refused to sell them to Wizard of the Coast, before Wizard of the Coast, TSR on Dungeons and Dragons. I refused to sell my stuff to them, even though people I knew who had a relationship with them were asking, because I didn't think they would do honor to it. I remember, you know, they were still calling Africa the Dark Continent back then. And even a game came out a few years before our game, Chikanga, and they were using, you know, called Spears. I'll say the next Spears of the Dawn. It lets you know how they were thinking about us. And in that, just the way we would be described, I said, white man wrote this, absolutely. And because he didn't give the respect that he should have. He thought he did, but he didn't give the respect that he should have given to the traditions, even in the way he's talking about it. And I want to say in that book somewhere, it said even the lion is the king of the jungle. Lie, the leopard is the king of the jungle. Lions don't even live in jungles, they live in savannas. But you have to respect the traditions enough to study that, you know, to research that. When I'm writing everything, when it comes to light sources and different things like that, I'm studying the part of Africa I'm writing about. Was this light source there? Or what light sources they use? Because it's important to me to get it right. You know, I'm an African traditionalist, I'm a nationalist, and I'm a Pan-Africanist. And so for me to want to show Africa from the ancient of days to now, I got to get it right. That's just me.
Balogun, are you part of the group, the Hama group, the historical African martial arts group that's on Facebook?
No, I'm friends with several of them.
Oh, okay. Like Damon Stint, and they're cool people.
Yeah, Damon Stiff. Yeah, so if you look up African Martial Arts Institute, that's us, the African Martial Arts Institute. African with the K. So a lot of people know me as a martial artist. You got others who know me as a spiritual traditionalist. Okay. To me, they all speak to everything I do, right? So that includes my writing. So even when I'm not writing Sword and Soul, I could be writing about a girl riding on a train. A martial art fight gonna break out somewhere. You know what I mean? Or an ancestor's gonna come down. Something gotta happen to, you know, for me.
As a matter of fact, that's how I met Balogun. I was doing research on African martial arts because as I was writing, I said, I'm not gonna have, you know, African warriors fighting, doing like flying side kicks and stuff like that. I needed to be as authentic as possible.
Samurai sword.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how I met him. So Enoch, give us a little bit about how you came into writing African fantasy, Sword and Soul.
All right. Well, Africa is home. So, I mean, this is natural to me, sort of. Yeah, you know, like Peter said, even here in Zambia, there is a lack of our own stories. It's somehow been sidelined by Western culture, you can say. But there's still a part that refuses to die through stories, superstitions, stories that our grandmothers have told us. So when I began writing, I was into a lot of fantasy, you know, the Lord of the Rings and things like that. And I wanted to write something like that, but it didn't feel natural because I couldn't connect with certain aspects of it. So I wanted to write something from what I'm familiar with, from home, I can say. And when I began to research into our own history, our own culture, I discovered so much. So there's just so much that hasn't been tapped into. And I guess that's why everyone here is doing this, because we've seen that there are some aspects, there's some points in our history, in our culture, that haven't been tapped into. And it's such a vast ocean of potential that we'll be telling stories for thousands and thousands of years. And I guess we are just the beginning, we're just the tip of it. Yeah, and there's just so much we can do. There's so much of our history and culture that it's been tried to be stepped on, but it refuses to die. And here we are. Yeah, a testimony to that.
Yeah. Sarah, what brings you what brought you to African fantasy, Sword and Soul?
As a child, I was an avid fantasy reader. And my natural habit was, okay, I want to be in this story next. So being Black, that means that for me, it was a natural bridge to connect to my roots, which growing up, especially in South Carolina, my people are Gullah. So I grew up hearing a lot of, like terms and so to speak, and having foods that I was slowly learning were just layovers from Africa. So for me, it was a natural bridge to start writing my fantasy with the heritage that I've inherited. So, eventually I was inspired by a lot of the big fantasy epics. Even like Game of Thrones put a fire under me because we had 2 Black people in the whole series. So in between books 4 and 5, my husband was bored. So I was like, hey, I'll write you a book. I just started writing a book off the top of my head, and it was like, no, I'm gonna do this with Black people next. And just trying to work it over is actually what led me to the Royal Heretic. Because it was like every iteration, it was like, this isn't Black enough. This isn't African enough. This is not true enough. So it was just trying to find where I fit in fantasy. And if a place cannot be made for me, then like always, I'm gonna make me a place.
Great. I think what you're saying, Sarah, is something that I think maybe all of us here kind of came across and brought us to writing African fantasy. It's interesting to me where the inspirations came from. When you're old school like me and like Charles was, a lot of our inspiration to write African-based fantasy came from reading Conan and Robert E. Howard and saying, hey, this is all right, but it's not representing us. And I noticed when I talked to some of the younger authors, they were more inspired by Game of Thrones and shows like that, where they saw, and that really was, for some of them, was an introduction to epic fantasy, and noticed that same void that all of us did when we were watching that, and decided instead of just fussing and arguing about it, let's get our pencils and our typewriters and our keyboards together and do it ourselves.
Well, that's the thing right there. Yeah, I think it's important not to. I don't fuss about it, because when I look at that, like George R. R. Martin, he's a white guy. He knows, what he knows. He knows UK, United Kingdom history and stuff like that. And so, yeah, of course, the colored people are going to be on the margins. But I kind of want to do the opposite, where it was like, okay, let's see what's going on in the Summer Isles. Let's see what's going on in those places, and then have the other people be the marginalized. Like, oh yeah, those are the people who live up in the north. But we don't really, a little bit about them. But having that, and also, Sarah, to what you were saying earlier, I had a similar thing where, while I was writing, I realized how much Eurocentric just stuff seeps in, where you're always oh, that doesn't actually feel like Africa, that doesn't feel Black. And I didn't realize how much was integrated in into my prose writing of that, and why we need to break that apart by doing these exercises of writing these stories.
Oh, sorry, it's called brainwashing.
Oh yeah, no, of course, yes. Yeah.
No, I'm gonna say, because a lot of people have problem talking about these things, and yes, most of the kids, the generation, were brainwashed. That's why I see some creators want to create stories. It still looks like something Western, but just put a black guy there. But I believe we should be able to create our own stories, because we had, although cultures are similar, but there's always something unique about every culture. So that was what my problem is. So I had that same problem too when I was creating, that's why you never saw my first book was, the guy with tights and, cape and all that, but just in a way it can still be used for the psychology of the black man, like I said, one of the things I didn't say this before, but one of the things that really motivated me to really push, apart from my own personal experience, because growing up, I used to draw only white people. Can you imagine that? The later I realized this is wrong. Just like what Sarah said, only seeing, you can see yourself in these things, although they were very interesting and they were properly done. So, but another thing it was one of my clients' kid, right? That he could draw. He liked to draw. So I asked him, okay, draw me your favorite superhero. He drew Ben 10. Okay, I said, okay, draw me a black superhero. He couldn't even imagine it. He was now trying to do the bean nose. So those things are like, we have no choice. We're actually in a psychological warfare, but we are being misguided by recent events. But really, there's an agenda, and we all need to make sure we play our part.
I definitely agree with Peter, because in Zambia we see the same thing. For my first novel that I completed featured a samurai. So I had to, get the history, the culture of Japan, because, I was into anime, watching a lot of samurai. And it just felt like that's the way to go, And I even finished it. People liked it, but I guess we'll never see it because it didn't feel natural. It felt like something was missing. So it was actually one of the first steps into realizing that, hey, what about here? What about what we have, our history, our culture? There's something there.
Yeah. That's the stories that you guys are sharing. Something I've heard from a lot of different artists and writers is that when they first encountered it, I've known even my cousin, who's a great artist, and he would always show me artwork that he was doing all the time. And one day I asked him, I said, well, why is it that all your characters were white? And he just stopped. And because he had never thought about it.
He never thought about it. Wow.
And I had another artist who said the same thing, that artist that I work with. He said actually when he decided to start doing his artwork with Black people, he was a Black person and he had to learn how to draw Black people. Because most artists
that is huge.
Yeah, exactly. Because most artists that are comic book artists, they're basically looking at DC and Marvel comics and drawing what they see.
And, it's not just in comic books. Student of mine, when he was in high school, he's been with me a long time. When he was in high school, he was a rapper. And he's always talking about, I shoot a nigga, I'll do this to a nigga, I'll blow a nigga's mama up. And I said, change all of that to white man. Change all that to a white man that you're gonna do to. And he sat and looked at his paper. He said, that doesn't sound right. Doesn't sound right to blow up a white man's mama, grandmama. But it sounds okay to blow up your own grandmama. So, it's all crazy, but he can't go crazy on white folks.
Yeah. So we're about to get into another conversation here.
It all fits. It all fits because all of that will speak to what you write, what you draw, because it's how you think. And so a lot of what we put out there should subtly change the thinking of people. If you go too didactic, well, then people are just going to reject it. But now with comic books, the strength of comics is you can give them the image. When you're writing a novel, you have to subtly bring things in, or you make the whole world Black unapologetically, and you don't have to worry about, you using different. So I'll write something, I use different Yoruba terms, and I'm not defining the terms. The first book, I put a glossary in there. After that, no more. So now you got to get with these terms. When you read Lord of the Rings and things of that nature, he's not explaining Celtic words he's using. You learn it, you get the context of it, and you end up actually using that in your normal everyday language. Yeah. Well, I'm going to do the same thing. So when I write now, you'll see all kinds of words, and you get the context of it. Yeah. It means this, right? And I'm not going to define it in a glossary anymore.
Yeah, I did the same thing when I wrote Changa Safari. I used Swahili terms and I didn't define them. And one person that was reading the book, they said, well, you forced us to learn Swahili. I was like, yeah, but in the process, you learned about the culture. Right. Let me go to the next question. I mean, because we got a topic that we could have a whole different conversation on, and an interesting conversation. So my next question is, what region or culture of African culture is, inspires you the most? I mean, because it's so vast, it's so much, but is there a particular culture that you got most of your inspirations from? And I'll start with Sarah.
Such a huge question. I try to stick to West Africa mostly because, that's where my people come from. And it's like the more I'm learning is the more I find I understand, because there are words that I already know because my grandmother used them that have just been held over for hundreds of years. It's just to learn more about West African culture and seeing, hey, I grew up with that too, like almost exactly like that. So that learning more about the specific different peoples of that region is where I like to concentrate on, because it helps me learn more about myself.
Balogun, what region of Africa do you seem to focus more on, attracts you the most?
For me, it's the Yoruba of Southwest Nigeria and the Teke of Gabon and the Congo. Those are the cultures I mainly deal with. Yoruba, because I'm a student, an initiate in different traditions in Ifa, which is the Yoruba spiritual tradition. And also I'm an initiate in some other traditions that are part of the Yoruba tradition. So I'm initiated to Obatala and Balogun. Balogun is not my name, it's my title, right? And that's war chief. And that's
it's tied to Ogun, right? Yeah.
From initiate, I'm a war chief for Ogun, mm-hmm. for the Ogun Society, right? So that I was interested by learning more, researching more for my fiction. I'm learning more about my tradition that I practice. And then the Teke tradition, that's from my father's line. And my father's side is actually Teke. Okay, that's part of, because we have many traditions, but in us, and many cultures within us who've been, throughout the diaspora, who've been taken and intermarriage and things. But Teke is one of the strongest representations of my father's line and DNA. Okay, so I'm very interested in Teke culture. So I've immersed myself in that. And actually, for me, when I write anything dealing with in Kikanga, it's an area called Satiba, which is the trade town, the major trade town in Kikanga. I use the Teke language when I'm writing and certain things they're saying. So I'm using Teke language in Beneath the Shining Jewel and Beneath the Shining Jewel 2, which I'm working on now.
Where is Teke from? What region is that from? I think I might miss that.
The Teke are from Gabon and
okay.
from the Congo.
Gotcha.
Right. So when people study Bwiti, the tradition, you probably heard of Iboga or ibogaine.
Mm-hmm.
They take this thing and they get off of heroin because they're taking iboga and everything. That comes directly from the Teke people from Gabon. And the Teke were known as, Teke means to sell. They were the big merchants, and they controlled the copper mines, and others would war with them trying to get the copper from them, right? So they're the only culture in Central Africa that actually had in the tropical forest, their kingdom. They didn't clear the forest. The Yoruba cleared the forest and made cities. They actually live in the forest, in the trees, underground. So they're one of the few. It's called the Tio Kingdom or the Teke Kingdom. And you can read about that, where they're one of the few that actually survived and thrived within the rainforest, actually. Okay. Other cultures have done that, but in Central and West Africa, they normally make cities. They cleared the area, but they didn't. They made the area their cities and made their homes from the actual thing. And if you've heard of bark cloth, that's cloth that comes from a tree. You take the tree and you beat it until it's soft as any other cloth that comes from the Teke people.
Antoine, where do you get most of your inspiration from?
Same spot. Well, as of late, because like I was saying before, I do contemporary, kind of like the Percy Jackson, but West Africa, and it's based around the Yoruba, the Ifa with the Orishas and everything like that. So, hearing about the Latin Ogun and stuff like that, I'm like, oh, I know all those people, Yamoja. I use all of those aspects. But I started with, like I said before, Angola, which the Kimbudu people have the Kishi mythology, and then I had a little bit of Swahili when I did the Sky Pirate Chronicles. And then a little bit of African diaspora stuff, which also ties in with some Orisha stuff, and like with Santeria and Candomblé, and what was the other bit? And I have a little bit of Caribbean stuff in there as well. But right now, like my main one would be Ifa and the Orishas right now.
Okay. Peter, what would you say your major influences are in your sword and soul and African fantasy?
Influences, right?
Well, what cultures do you pull your creativity from? What African cultures inspire you?
Oh, everywhere. That's why you can see my graphic novel. It's different characters, and although I knew there's no way I could tell all the stories because Africa has about 2,000.
It's so many.
It's so many. So what I did was I did regions, and so I'm putting them in this fantasy world. So I derive energy from all of them, all of them.
I'm actually very similar with because my young adult series, that's contemporary and that's just like one region, but my adult one, where the Kishi and the Sky Pirate Chronicles live, it's all taking from, and I'm making my own like huge world map of every little individual, right?
And what I'm doing is not just these particular 10 characters. What I'm doing in the story, we're weaving other cultures in the story. Like in Mbuze, if you check out Mbuze comic book, if you notice in part 2, we put the Pygmies. The Pygmies are a collective of people that live somewhere in Central Africa, in Congo. So we highlighted their culture, how they live, who they were. They were mainly hunters and craft people. So we kind of told your story and told the story of Mbuze, who's coming from the kingdom of Congo itself, and we talked about the king. So what we're doing is also in these individual characters, like Chayoma that we did the Kickstarter for, we talked about the Eastern Africa, about the lower part of East Africa, the southern is where you have today Buganda, Uganda. But then they were known as the Kitara Empire. So I know it's going to take a while to tell all these stories, but that's the whole agenda, to use these characters, then still in these stories highlight the other tribes, other ethnic groups. So basically we derive energy from everywhere because it's almost endless. It's crazy,
That is true. Yeah. But what about you, Enoch? Where do you get your African fantasy inspiration from?
Yeah, for me, it's everywhere as well.
Yeah.
In my book, Nasomi's Quest, she travels a lot. She starts from a city, which is divided into chiefdoms, which is a common thing here in Africa. And she goes all over the place. So we find that each place that she goes to is inspired by a different part of Africa. It's from all over, southern, western, eastern Africa. I get my inspiration from everywhere.
Yeah, similar to me. So I've got one more group question I'm going to ask. We've been having such a good discussion. Getting tight on time, so I'm going to drop one of the questions. So this is a question that I get all the time, and I've been in done panels where this comes up all the time. So I wanted to ask you guys to get your opinion on it. How is world building based on African cultures different or similar to world building that you see in any other types of epic fantasy? Are there any specific challenges or anything that you go through when you're trying to world build in an African-based culture? And I will start with, I'm going to jump around this time. I'm going to start with Balogun this time.
No, not challenges. You got to research. Differences, I think, from the Western culture. The Western fantasy focuses a lot on magic, and for me, and what I've seen of other authors who write sword and soul or African fantasy, it's more focused on spirituality.
Yep.
Right. That's one thing I found, and of course the creatures are different. Like you could have a dragon in your story in Africa, but set somewhere in Africa. I don't know. I mean, we have it in Kikanga, but some things are definitely going to be different. Like a vampire in the Western world, we know what that is. But a lot of times the vampire in African cultures is different. So you got the Impundulu, which is a bird that also can it defecates, and then it uses fat to light that feces on fire, and it drops on people. You have the Adze, which is a firefly that can turn itself into a human, but when it's a firefly, that's when it's sucking blood, of people when it goes into their homes or whatever, sucking their blood. You got the Sambo Sam, which is a creature that hangs in trees. It has iron teeth and hooks for its feet, and hangs down and attacks people. And then it also will give them riddles. Some people riddles, and if they can say the riddle, it gives them immense amounts of wealth. You can't say the riddle, well, your dinner. So
the troll underneath the bridge.
Exactly, that same type of energy.
The Yoruba one.
They're in my book.
The one about the I don't know, the one that steals children at night.
Is that the Iloko? No, not the Iloko. That's something else.
I'm trying to remember the name though. It was more like it's a mythical creature, but it's like a monster, not just a monster, but it was a creature like a leprechaun, but not a leprechaun. You understand?
The Tokolosh? No, not the Tokolosh.
No.
Yeah, Tokolosh is.
I'm trying to remember.
South Africa.
Yeah. No, that's like even the Kisi.
Yoruba. It's from Yoruba mythology.
Yeah.
And it's actually very popular. I'm trying to remember the name.
I would like to, if you remember, please say. One of these are like the fairy type, the fae types. There's so many. Yeah, that's why it's so hard to remember.
When you talk about fairies amongst the Yoruba, the name for fairies is Iwin. So there are different stories of the Iwin. In the book Once Upon a Time in Africa, this one of the characters goes into this area in this forest, and there are these cute little squirrels, and he said, hey, squirrels, and then the squirrels started gathering around him. They actually Iwin. They started gathering around him, and he's like, hey, there's a lot of you squirrels, and then they're kind of blocking this way. Okay, can you move, cute little fellas? And then they started attacking them, and so those were the Iwin in the story.
So Sarah, what let's see, make sure I'm not getting out beside myself. What what do you see about African fantasy and concern? What do you see are the differences or the similarities to doing world building?
One of the biggest differences and one of the challenges, especially as a Black American, going back to what we were talking about earlier, is the decolonization of our minds.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a years-long process for me to stop going to the defaults that I grew up reading about in fantasy, to get away from the traditional knights and princesses and kings and queens and actually make the conscious choices of what this African-inspired fantasy is going to be like and about, how that world is going to work, and not just, oh, they're just wizards walking around and there's probably a couple of dragons and they'll probably just save the princess. No. To make that choice that, no, we're going to use the Aziza, we're going to use the Topolosh, we're going to use all these other creatures that I can't remember the names of right now. I have them in a book somewhere.
There's so many, yes.
But so many. I love them all. And to learn new religious structures and get away from even being a Christian, get away from the Christianity mindset going into it, and how my characters would relate to their religion and their idea of gods or no gods, and how they will relate to magic if there is any. And it's not as much of a struggle as it was when I first started out, but it's still, when I start out, I had to remind myself, okay, no shortcuts. You grew up with this stuff. We're not doing that anymore. That's in high school. That's in the past. We're a big girl now. So we're gonna write big girl fantasy. And it's just the constant decolonization.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Can I piggyback real quick? Because it was so good what Sarah and Balogun were saying about that, because that's my challenge too, and we were talking about before about like the decolonization of the writing. And especially in particular, I give the example from the Orishas, like Christianity and Western thought really does insert itself, and not just in African lore. When I did a panel with a bunch of other like non-European, like the considered pagan belief systems, Christianity did a number on a lot of that original folklore, Africa notwithstanding. So for example, Eshu, he's one of the Orishas in Ifa, oftentimes gets, lumped in with Catholicism and is called the devil, when that's not really a real concept in the West African mentality. There's no real concept of good and evil in the sense of like a god, or like the almighty God and then the devil. There's more of a gray morality kind of system where there isn't really like, the gods or entities and beings are amoral in that there's no, like with a storm, like a tidal wave. That's not anything evil. That's just nature, and that's just how it is. And that's how, sometimes the manifestation of like Olokun or Yamoja go about. And just doing the research, as we were saying before, I think is really important too, because you need to make sure that you're pulling from multiple sources, not just like reading one book and be like, oh, okay, that's exactly what it is. You got to read multiple. I mean, that's what research is, is to look at multiple cross-reference, see where the source of that comes from. Because a lot of times if you're looking at some of these African mythologies and if they're tied to some, or if they're publicized or spoken about, post-colonialism, you'll see a lot of the insert of a lot of other, faith systems or Western thought. So really important. I just want to like make that like really clear, like, that research part, I wanted to piggyback off of that. And also just show examples of how it shows up.
You just reminded me of something. Yeah, Balogun, it's Abiku. Am I correct? Abiku. That's the name of that. Yeah, Abiku.
Yeah. Abiku is baby born to die. That's what that actually means.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, but the legend is like the Abiku comes to take the child at night. That's the legend, right? But now there's something I wanted to share with you guys. This is a true story. In my village in Imo State, right, the East. This is a true story. It's not fiction. It's not lies. There's a part where, because they do a lot of construction, right? And Julius Berger there's a company that's allocated to work on those parts, right? To drill, because there's a lot of oil in the east in Nigeria, the eastern part of Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
there's a part deep in the forest. They told them this is not fantasy. They told them, do not go there. That place is sacred. They didn't want to hear. They tried it, and the trucks could not go further than that. So there's a higher power that is right there. So this shows you that our culture and our history is not colonization. It's not slavery. It goes way deeper than that. Way before the Egyptian civilization. Mm-hmm. They said there's a little statue there. They said the story of that little statue predates, as in the story. The tales come from the great grandfather. They said that, like, before time, that thing has been there. This is a true story. This is real. It's not a joke. So that kind of impacted me, and I'm like, wow. As in, it's not like when you hear about Thor or you hear about mermaids. No, this is real. People saw it happen. It doesn't work. The trucks couldn't pass that barrage, and they had to end it.
There's something similar in Zimbabwe with the Nyami Nyami, where they were trying to build a dam there, and then they had like the whole water spirit thing, and then they're like, the dam could not be built, and then like the people that were saying like, yeah, you can't do it, like
let it be. You don't understand it. Just go around it, leave it alone.
So Enoch, what do you see that the differences or the similarities of world building when using this based on African cultures?
Yeah, that's why I think I like the term sweat and soul, because it speaks something deep about our culture. It's not, for us, this is not entertainment. Like I think in the Western type of storytelling, it's something to escape from the daily wrangles of life, escape, read a book, and come back to reality. For us, this is reality. It's because our culture, our history is not just about entertainment, but it's part of who we are. There is that deep connection that these stories have. They talk about family, they talk about connection, they talk about our soul, I can say. Yeah. So, it's you'll find that, like we've said, some creatures will be similar, some stories will be similar, but there's just certain differences that seem to be coming from deep in our soul. And yeah, that is why I think when this was going to be Sweat and Soul, it's just a perfect moniker. Yeah. So it's a history, it's a culture that has, or cultures, because Africa is not a country, but there's just so many people, so many places, so many stories. It's so vast. Yeah, that's why I said, it will take thousands of years to really dig into our past. And because of this, it brings a certain richness, a certain feeling, I can say. Because for me, when I'm writing Sweat and Soul African fantasy, I feel like this is home. This is who I am. This is where I belong. And I feel that connection when I'm reading maybe stories from Nigeria, when I'm reading stories from Angola. It feels like, yeah, I know these stories. I know what they're talking about. This is who I am. This is my history. This is my culture. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. It's one of the I think all of us, I know the same thing that I did when I wrote my stories. I was basically looking at different cultures in different parts of Africa and using them to create a world, bringing some cultures in the close proximity to each other. But I need to go and ask Antoine about his aspects of world building, although I think we've heard it.
Yeah. That's why I was like, can I piggyback on with those? Because that was my segue for mine. Yeah.
But what do you think about when the world building, using African cultures to world build? What do you think are the challenges and or the similarities or differences when you're world building with other cultures?
Yeah, so I'll reiterate that for me, like my main catalyst, or I think that propels me, is really fighting against the colonization aspect. Like I was saying before with some of the examples that I gave, I feel like my main mission is just to show a different thought process, because there is, especially like Sarah was saying, in America we have like this like one thought, this one homogenous sort of thought about what things should be, and the idea of the spirituality base. That's why I really do again agree with the sword and soul idea, difference from what Balogun was saying about magic, just being kind of like just magic, but it being a spirit based, something that comes from within. I think that's the main thing that I'm always trying to hone in on.
Peter, when you're looking at world building, I know you've kind of expressed your feelings about it as well, but when you're looking at world building using African cultures, what do you think are the challenges or the opportunities there?
I'm still trying to grasp the question, because things say challenges and opportunities. Okay, is it challenges that I have building the world?
Yeah, when you decided I'm going to write a African fantasy-based story, what were the challenges of doing that, or what were the things that you felt were easy to do, that kind of thing?
Okay, no, it wasn't easy.
You kind of explained it, but
yeah, it wasn't easy. Yeah, but I'll just say it wasn't easy because I had to detach myself from the West and what I'm already accustomed to. Because when I started, I was still doing stuff that was similar to. Because I played God of War. I saw what they did with the Greek pantheon, and those things still stuck, at the beginning. Even creating the characters, I had to let it go, So the challenges were actually now going to museums, right? I had to go to museums. I had to travel back home, talk to my elders. Those are the challenges. I literally had to do those things to get back to enter, to be in that realm, so I can grab the original storytelling abilities. So because everything is a realm, you got to be in it. So those are the challenges. Yeah, I had to just stay away and cut out. Then of course I also kind of used, but when it comes to that, because if you notice, most cultures have similarities. They have customs, they have a way of life. Nobody is a savage. No one. Although some people might call some other savage just for political reasons, right? Propaganda, and use it to kill them, like what King Leopold did, and murdered 15 million Black people. I don't know why nobody talks about that, but they talk about the Holocaust. That was the first Holocaust. So
you can hear about that in university, like never in high school, but university.
And these things should talk about. There should be a movie on that. So and those are the challenges I had to break out. In order to understand and see the path, see where I'm going to.
That's great. So what I want to do now is I'm going to ask each individual author to create a question that's specific to their particular creativity and what they're doing, and so we can just to get a feel for that. And each of you, I have a different question for each one of you. So we're going to start with Sarah, and we're going to talk about the Royal Heretic. And we're going to ask you, want to know how were you able to, and because Sarah, one of the things that struck me unique about Sarah's book is that we don't often see fantastic fiction based on Egyptian or Kemet culture, and that's what I saw in Sarah's book. And so my question is, how were you able to incorporate that history and that culture into the Royal Heretic?
I first became fascinated with a lot of the ancient Egyptian history because of my art history classes in college, which of course, art history, they did a super deep dive into that, but did a little bit of Africa for about 2 weeks. But whenever I have encountered Egyptian fantasy, they've always been like this shining example of civilization, and I wanted to make them the bad guys. So it's a fascinating subject because ancient Egyptian history is a mess and full of drama and is way better to read than any history of England's royal family. Just between the incest in Game of Thrones has nothing on them. So it's just like between the obvious lies in their history, the trying to clean up, we lost this, major battle with the Hittites. It was just like, that's just so ripe for the kind of messy, historical fantasy-ish drama I like to write. So it's like, I get to play with a new royal structure as opposed to just a straight divine right of kings. It's a little, you have the religion completely intertwined with it. The structure of nobility to merchants to peasants is different than the fantasies that I've grown up with. So it was fun to bring that to a fantasy setting and then also have their gods actually walking around instead of being this just lofty idea in the air. So a lot of research, and every 5 seconds highlighting something and then writing it down in my book. No, you got to use that. So just research and having fun.
Okay. So Balogun, your question is, how has being a Babalaw and an African martial artist influenced your sword and soul African fantasy storytelling?
I'm impressed again. You got Babalaw right too. Wow. What is going on today? All right.
Oh my goodness.
Come on, man.
So the way it's influenced me, as I said earlier, really it's influenced everything I do. But one big thing is, any part we have a body of knowledge called the Odu. Okay, the Odu, there are 256 Odu, and within that, there are stories in the Odu called essay. There are maybe 1,000 or more stories in each essay. Nobody knows all of that, but that's a lot of knowledge. So in those Odu, they're structured a certain way. And there, once again, there are stories in there structured a certain way. All of my stories, when I'm in Sword and Soul, are structured the same way the Odu are. That's a little secret there. So all of them have that same structure as the Odu, and that allows me to be able to be real in the way I'm telling African stories. All right. And then also learning the technology. So when I learned to divine, I learned, once again, I said it's 256 Odu. It's 256, that's 256 patterns of life. In the computer, it's 256 patterns of light. When I divine, I'm using a binary system of 1s and 2s. The computer uses a binary system of 0s and 1s. And I always say to people, well, which one is the older technology? So when people talk about high technology, well, the okwele that I throw is a chain with C halves on it. And then I also use a wooden tray to mark the Odu that I throw. But that's high tech. It's as high tech as that computer, right? So for me, I've learned really a a pride and not just a knowledge, but an experience that these things that we use in Sword and Soul exist to this day and are still very powerful. I tell people when I cosplay, I'm wearing the same clothes that people wore in the 1400s, 1200s, 1930, from the continent of Africa. They're wearing the same. I can wear this. I can bring out my clothes right now, and those same clothes I bring out, our teacher's grandfather also wears, and you got pictures of his grandfather wearing. So that technology is there, right? Exactly. And also the Buba, the Shokoto, those have been here for ages. It's such a powerful technology and works, right? That it's not changing. Whereas you can take pictures from the Western world from the 1400s, well, you didn't even pictures, from the 1800s to now, and the styles total different. Now, of course, in all throughout Africa, they're wearing t-shirts and different things too, but they can always wear their traditional clothing. Nobody's gonna sit and put on no pilgrim clothes here. Not just walking around and they look crazy as hell, right? So that has always been, for me, empowering, and it's allowed me it made it easy for me to write, because at least with clothes and things, I don't have to do much research, no matter what year I'm writing in, if I'm writing on the continent, right? So that I've been able to use the technologies in my stories, right? And actually the technology of how what I do is structured in divination in telling my stories when I write books. You know, people always say, well, you know, you write your books, why are your books so short? Because the Odu is structured in basically eight paragraphs, right? And so I have to now stretch that 8-paragraph structure into a novel. And I majored in film, and film is very succinct. It's short in the way you write it, right? So those two things have made it hard for me to write longer things. I've gotten better. So that's pretty much where that. And then as far as martial arts, African martial arts speaks to it. It's the rhythm of the thing. I learned in African martial arts, if you don't know a thing, it doesn't exist, right? So I give, when I'm world building, right in the beginning of my stories, I give something that I know I got to speak to in the middle of this story, right? But as soon as I give it to you, it exists in your mind. Mm-hmm. So now I can build on it. Very small and subtly. By the time I get to it in the middle, you understand what I'm hitting you with. So the idea of the Namars, you get hit from the beginning with the idea of Namars, and you start saying, oh, that's the Namars are zombies. And then you start realizing, the Namars are people that have psychological issues, and to relieve their anxiety, they have to eat flesh, yours or their own, right? And so those things I'm able to do, and that did not come from, it came from my mind to a certain degree, but it comes from my study of Ori, which is, once again, going back to Ifa. Ifa studies the brain, and there are 3 levels of the brain. Okay, well, we call it Ori. You have your head, you have your spiritual head, which is at the navel, you have your higher head, which is at your big toe. And so when I created the Namars, I made 3 levels of Namars, right? So it allows me to tell stories in that way.
Okay, cool. So Antoine, you guys, we can go all day with this, but Antoine, your question is, what inspired you to write young adult fantasy set in modern times with African deities as your backdrop?
So growing up, I felt like the stories that were most effective to me weren't necessarily those bigger stuff like Lord of the Rings, like that felt like too much for me sometimes, but the contemporary stuff, like I used to read Animorphs and Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, were set in modern times, so there was something that I could relate to. Like, the kids will be talking about Radio Shack, which, rest in peace, doesn't exist anymore. Or they'll be talking about, just like modern things. But then there's that element of magic or the fantastical or something science fiction related, whether it's like an alien invasion, you're going off to, a cool summer camp with Greek gods, or, you got Hogwarts and you get in sorting houses. For some reason, I don't know what that was for me, that it was so effective, but I kind of thought that same thing would work for modern teens today. And I'm always very similar to, oh my God, what's the brother's name from, he wrote the Miles Morales book. He did Way Down Low. Oh my God, something with an M. I'm forgetting the author's name. What is that gentleman's name? He has dreadlocks, like the
Marlon James.
Not Marlon James. The other. He was a teacher. Oh, it's gonna bug me so bad that I'm blanking on his name right now. But his whole mission statement was that he wants to write stories that can be easily read by younger people, particularly for him, young Black men. And that's something that I really wanted to do. Like, I opened up my book with a basketball game, and then I relate that to the spirituality of what my main character is going through via the Orishas and all that. And that becomes very effective to me, because you can talk about, I can talk about LeBron James or like Steph Curry in there to be like, oh yeah, I know that. Okay, I'm familiar with that. So that the insertion into the world is a lot easier than if you're just, getting thrown into, all this mythology based stuff and you're hearing all these names you're not familiar with. So the contemporary aspect of it has been a really good segue for me, for my readers to like get into the book. And that's the reason why I think I chose contemporary. It's very easy for me to write too, because it's naturally my voice that I can insert. And then I can throw in some other things for like education and be like, hey, let's learn about this other stuff that you might not be familiar with, and go on this journey in this mythology that you might not be familiar with. So yeah, for me, that's been an effective methodology to get the stories out.
So Enoch, my question for you is, and we've kind of been touching on this as well throughout the presentation, but
Jason Reynolds, sorry, I had his shout him out. Jason Reynolds, that's who I was talking about. Sorry, okay. Jason Reynolds, there you go.
Okay, thanks, man. So Enoch, how do you think, coming from East African culture, because most of what we've been seeing lately in African fantasy and sword and soul has been basically from a West African influence or perspective. How do you think that, coming from an East African perspective, how does that affect your fantasy writing or makes it different? I give you a heart.
Actually, Zambia is in Central Africa. Yeah, but just below Congo. So the DRC, okay. The country just below south of the DRC, that's where Zambia is. So Central Africa.
Okay.
I can still answer that question, because first, here in my country, we have 72 tribes. And that just shows you how vast Africa is, because in Zambia alone, you have 72 tribes. Each of those tribes will have their own cultures, their own manner of speaking, their own dressing, their own food, their own ceremonies, their own traditions. And that's there's such vast potential in terms of story, in terms of sources of inspiration. And really, for me, the biggest challenge is, what am I leaving out? Because I have a source of so much. I have a source of so much. And that is why, for me, when I came to start writing Sword and Soul, like I said, I felt like, this is home. This is me. I felt liberated. I felt free. Like, now my mind can go anywhere. Because, when I try to write like they do in Japan, in the West, I was caged, because I had to stretch myself in such a way that I had to put myself into their kind of thinking, and I couldn't do that because it was strange to me. But when I came back home, I was like, oh my God, this is an ocean. This is an untapped ocean, and there's just so much that can be done, and it's crazy. You know, I have so many stories, so many pieces of inspiration that I have. It's really difficult to try to bring it all together. Like, for example, in Nasomi's quest, in as much as, you know, trying to write about different cultures, which were all made up or inspired by different cultures in Africa, it was a challenge to bring all of them together. And I enjoyed that challenge. Yeah, so bringing them all together, because each of them are different, each of them has got their own culture, each of them have their own language and stories and spirituality. It's for me, it's a way to try to bring that all together and try to tell an interesting story. So the world building part was not difficult for me, I can say, because I'm surrounded by stories, I'm surrounded by superstition, I'm surrounded by history within my own country, and coming up with let's say the languages, because I have a couple of languages there which I created. So they are fictional, but if someone, for example, from Nigeria was to read through that, somehow they'll get an understanding of what I'm talking about. If someone from South Africa was to read that, they would somehow understand what I'm trying to say. Because the languages, I try to pick from different parts of Africa, just try to make something unified. And another aspect maybe would be the folklores and the myths that inspired my writing. And I've actually, Antoine, I subscribe to your YouTube channel.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. They're from nothing. And so if you
we
read
did
my
the
book,
because we did the Teen African Myth thing, the collab. Yes. That was fun.
Yeah. So if you read my book, you begin to see some pieces of, especially creatures which you talk about.
Mm-hmm.
There's a series of African creatures that you do. There's like the Inca Nyamba, Inkinanka, the Mokelembembe. Yeah. So I try to bring all that into the book, and I think for me the biggest aspect of my writing is the spirituality. Yeah, and each culture has got their own form of beliefs and religion. Some worship one god, some worship many gods, some worship no gods at all, and all that was part of the book. So it's like a buffet of history and culture. Yeah, but I try to make it interesting. Yeah.
You did a good job at that. Peter, your question is similar to Enoch's. How has being Nigerian, specifically Igbo, affected your storytelling when it comes to Cheoma and your other books?
All right, I was on mute. Sorry. Okay, you mean me being a Nigerian?
Yeah. How has that affected the way you tell your stories?
Yeah, because from what I could deduce from that question is, I think psychologically, I wanted to showcase the cultures first of all, and there's something that I felt was even wrong from the whole idea of Nigeria, because it's colonized, it was colonized, right? Okay, first of all, me as an Igbo man, it's like I don't have rights to be anywhere if I'm not in Nigeria. You understand? It's a culture. There are people that are brought together. So not to sound too political, but that kind of helped push me to the direction of how I want to tell the stories to showcase these cultures, And okay, me being an Igbo man in Nigeria, seeing that it's like, if I want to leave Nigeria, I gotta go with a Nigerian passport. But as an Igbo man, I cannot do that. Do you understand what I'm saying? So with my stories, or what I'm trying to do is now, okay, these are the cultures. This is Africa.
Wait, is that specific to you being Igbo? Like can a Yoruba person have a passport?
No, everybody can travel.
Oh, okay.
But as an Igbo man, I can't hold an Igbo man passport. Don't you understand?
Oh, I understand. Oh no, I completely understand. Yeah.
Passport. It's something
Right.
that you won't think about, but you really think about it, but that's what it is. You can't travel on your own. There's no government, But now, so that kind of shapes me in showcasing the roots of these people that helped me shape these stories, and that's why like in Charoma, we really went deep, to mix their mythology plus the stories from the land itself. And we're just started, the story is still coming, there's a lot coming on the way. So I don't know, does that kind of help the question?
Yeah, that answers the question, because you talked about how your sources. So hey, I knew this was going to go long, and I'm happy it did, because I got great people together like this, great minds together, and the different perspectives, and it really I think if anyone was had any questions about Sword and Soul and African fantasy, I think they will find a lot of them answered in this discussion. So I'm going to ask everybody to briefly tell us what you're working on and how to get in contact with you and where to find you on social media. And we'll start with Sarah.
All right. Best place to find me is on Twitter. You can find me at Killian, Killian Fantasy. That is where I talk about my writing, my art, my comics, all my creative stuff. I'm also on Instagram at Sarah_Macklin. And I'm still a lurker on many of the Facebook groups. So you might see me there too.
Okay. Antoine?
I have a one-stop shop. It's just AntoineBandele.com. The way you spell my name is the French version, so Antoine. And then Bandele is Bandele.com. You'll find social media, my services, my publishing works, all of it right there.
Okay. Enoch?
I'm also on Twitter and Facebook. On Twitter, you can find me at Simbaya, or small letters, or one word. And on Facebook, just search for Enoch Simbaya. You'll catch it there.
Okay. Peter?
Yeah. That will be Peda Entertainment, the website that opens doors to everything we're doing. So Peda, that's PEDA entertainment.com. Yeah. With that, the social media are right there. Everything we worked on for the past 10 years, or let's say 5 years, and all our social media links right on the Peda Entertainment website.
Okay. And Balogun?
I'm working on Beneath the Shining Jewel Book 2, as I said. You can find me on Facebook. You just Facebook/African with a K .marshall.arts. You can find me on Instagram at Balogun, BALO, well, you can see it right there, Balogun.Ojetade. Okay. So I'm on Instagram there. My website is chroniclesofharriet.com, where I deal with sword and soul, steampunk, diesel funk, all the other punks, horror, just different things. That's more of my writing side on there. Okay. And then you can always also, if you look up African martial arts with a K, I'm guaranteed to come up, including our Facebook group, our Instagram group, all of that.
So thank you, everyone. Thank y'all for coming. Thank you for this amazing discussion.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. It's great.
I learned a lot from you guys, and I'm glad that all of you were able to come together, interact like this. Everything turned out exactly the way I hoped it would be. I'm Milton Davis from MV Media. I hope you enjoy this discussion, and I hope you'll take the time to look up what's going on with each one of these creative artists and enjoy their work and continue to support Sword and Soul and African martial arts. So everybody, take care and Sword and Soul forever.
Sword and Soul forever.
Yeah, Sword and Soul forever. All right, guys, later.